As we assemble here in the dimly lit corridors of software development, I stand before you not merely as a fellow developer, but as a detective of sorts, unraveling mysteries etched within commit messages. Our case tonight is one that's all too common in our world, the mystery of missing context in commit messages, often leaving us with the whats, but no whys. Our version control system, think of it as a vast cryptic diary, a place where developers scribe their actions, revealing what code was altered. Yet these entries often mask a deeper enigma, the rationale behind the change. It's akin to a detective having facts of a crime, but not the motive. Merely stating change sorting algorithm tells us little of the plot. Why was the change made? What brought about this transformation? Imagine instead stumbling upon a commit message like this. Change sorting algorithm from quick sort to merge sort due to performance degradation on large, nearly sorted datasets. Suddenly a light flickers in the dark. We glimpse a motive. Our detective mind realizes that the change wasn't just random or reckless, but a calculated move. Such commit messages are akin to detailed case files. They not only list the changes, but also narrate the story behind them, giving insights into the protagonist's mind. This context is vital in our investigation, particularly when the storyline is complex and our changes not immediately discernible. Let's say we're writing a feature that relies upon the widget appender. We know that we can pass the add widget method an array, and we expect to receive back a new array with an extra widget. But now there's an error in our code because the original array has been mutated. How peculiar. We here at Widget Tech practice functional programming. Surely this was a mistake. Let's start by investigating the method definition. There's no question about it. That array is being mutated. It'd be easy enough to change the code, but this would be reckless before we know the motive for this crime. There could be other classes that rely upon this behavior. Let me check the commit message. Oh man, that guy's such a pain in the ass. Now we have no idea whether we can change the code. We'd better hope we have good tests in place. But can we trust a guy who writes commit messages like this? Well, you know what they say, move fast and break things. We modify the method to duplicate the array before appending to it. Suddenly the pages go off. The production environment's falling over. But this couldn't be us though, right? There's a feeling of unease, a small voice of doubt in the back of the mind. Something isn't quite right. As the evidence of our mistake begins to mount, that voice grows louder. It's as if your stomach drops, a sense of dread spreading through your body. If only someone had told us. So how could the original author have helped us to avoid this pain? Crafting the perfect commit message depends upon a lot of factors, like risk, complexity, but even organizational requirements. But there are some common guidelines though. While there are many times where a commit is so small and inconsequential that a commit body isn't needed, the simplicity of performing an inline commit lends itself to poor messages. Instead, you should pass the v or verbose flag to git commit. When you do this, you can see the changes when you're writing the commit, and it provides an opportunity to reflect on your intent. If I work on anything for more than a short time, I'm likely to forget that I'd made a difficult choice. So I review the code to refresh my memory. A great complement to verbose committing is adding in patches. While the primary purpose of patch adding is to let you commit only some of the changes in a file, it has a great side effect of forcing you to look at the code before you commit. In this example, I have an existing view for creating a user that has new modifications. By using the patch or p flag with git add, I can see the changes in isolation. This hunk of code relates to uploading a photo. Seems as good a place as any to start committing, so I'll stage it. Now, this next hunk relates to notifications. That's a very different task, so I'll save it for another commit. Now, the view is both staged, but also unstaged. I can commit only the image upload without the notifications, and I had an opportunity to review my changes. One thing to watch out for is you can't patch an untracked file. You can, however, prepare an untracked file by passing the intent to add or capital N flag. Once you've done that, the patch will work as expected. Of course,
sorry,
yes.
Can you do git add intent to add dot just to say right on it?
You can, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Totally can, absolutely. Of course, I don't actually type all that out. I have aliases set and configured. So I use GAI for git add intent to add. I use GAP for git add patch, and GC for git commit verbose. The value there isn't the less number of characters, but it's making it easier for me to do the right thing. So I'm unlikely to cheat. It's so easy to type GC that I honestly can't remember the last time that I passed a message to git commit. And I would never hold myself up as having the perfect commit messages. But given how low the bar is, I think it's pretty easy to be better. So I'm certain that many people will disagree with me on this, but I'm actually not too fussy about the subject line of commit. I just want to see something quick that helps me identify the commit that made the important change rather than, say, Robocop fixes. The rule is to limit the message to 50 characters, and I generally do my best to keep to that and save the detail for the body. A lot of people say that if you need more than 50, you've done too many things. I don't really like black and white rules, but if you're saying I did something and something, maybe take a second to be sure that that shouldn't be multiple commits. Next, take the time to consider the why. What goes in the body can vary from task to task, but simply ask yourself, what would you want to know if you were new to the team and needed to understand the intent of the code? Were there important conversations that led to this task being performed? Did you make decisions based upon context that isn't instantly apparent? Feel free to be verbose. You never know when this perpetrator will come back to haunt you or someone else. It's not uncommon that I just outright say this was done under time pressure and I wasn't given the opportunity to consider alternatives. In fact, I wrote this commit just today. And not only can that help people confused by your decision, but as a bonus, it's more likely they'll be sympathetic rather than bad-mouthing you. Consider including a reference to the issue. You shouldn't rely on this for context. I've actually encountered situations where a change of issue tracking software makes these links useless, but it could help to bring more context. You can even reference Slack conversations, websites you relied upon. And now, my fellow sleuths, our objective isn't to pen down every minor detail, but to strike a balance. Writing commit messages that serve as clear, concise, yet rich case notes that offer critical insights into our investigation. Yes.
Sorry, got this drawing going on. I'm like, oh, do I interrupt it?
Yeah, go for it.
Your markdown link there, does that work? Like, where does that work in GitHub? Does that get treated like a link or?
For those who may not hear, where does the markdown work? It's actually quite variable. It is far from universal that things reading that will present it as a clickable link. And I would do it merely because sometimes it may be clickable. And if it's not, it's pretty easy to see what the intent was. But I have found that it's inconsistent at best.
Yeah.
Yeah. In our quest to unmask these stories behind code changes, let us remember, every commit message is an opportunity to unravel a part of our software's complex narrative. A narrative that's waiting to be discovered, understood, and appreciated. More importantly, though, have conversations about what style best suit your team. I was speaking to someone who really appreciates the conventional commits approach. One of the conventional conventions is to prefix the commit with commit subject, with a tag that tells you what type of commit it is. So that could tell you that it's a feature or a bug fix, etc. And you can include a bang to mark the commit as a breaking change. I haven't actually found this valuable, but they version their application using semver, and it allows the tooling to automatically increment the version number. So the context of your project and your organization are important. The implications for good commit messages are far-reaching. These well-documented traits of thought prompt developers to consider their actions meticulously, fostering a sense of accountability and a higher standard of work. Moreover, they prove instrumental when tracing back the steps to a particular software anomaly, as any seasoned detective would attest to the importance of a detailed chronicle. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of this practice lies in its potential to usher in new detectives onto the scene. A new team member handed this comprehensive dossier can swiftly follow the narrative, understanding past decisions and strategies, thus accelerating their integration into the team. In the shadow of our code repositories, let's endeavor to shed light, providing a beacon to our fellow developers and perhaps even our future selves. So grab your magnifying glass, don your detective hat, and let's embark on the journey to unearth the hidden stories in our commits. And remember, the devil's in the details, or should I say, the narrative is in the commit. Any non-interrupting questions? Up to that.
What happens when you squash commits?
Could you be more specific?
You know about squash.
I squash commits all the time. That's actually why the commit that I said I did today has yesterday's date on it. Oh, wait, do you mean what happens when you squash commits when you merge a PR? Right. So I must confess, I don't really know the answer to that because I would never squash a PR. I squash my commits all the time. So the reason why the example I provided earlier had yesterday's date on it is that I had about half a dozen work in progress commits and then squashed them down before I pushed them up. But I'm a big fan of telling a story, and the idea of squashing a PR has always worried me for the reason you highlight, that like you lose your but if anyone has used squash commits and found that the narrative was still in check, I'd love to have a chat to you later. Yes.
Well, I mean, on that though, like, can't you just take that narrative to another level where you're saying, in my trunk, I've got a squash commit, but then I can go to that PR if it's in GitHub, for example, and still look at every commit one by one.
So I guess the question I'd ask is, how easy is it to track back from your code to a pull request? For me, in my editor, I have all of the commits, like the git blame inline. And so as I'm in my code, I'm reading the commit message that assigned that line. And so, yeah, I could go find the PR, but it's much easier if I can just look at it right there. Yeah.
Would you make such a change, all this basic change, instead of putting instead of only putting that context inside your commit, you could also consider adding a comment.
So the question is, would you consider adding a comment for an important, sorry, was it a performance change? Yes, an important performance rate change, rather than only putting it in a commit. And the answer to that is I would, yes. However, I have worked in many organizations where comments are heavily frowned upon. I think I live somewhere in the gray area where I disagree with the idea that all code should be self-documenting. I think there are edge cases, and rather than try and be dogmatic about it, sometimes you need a comment. Yeah. But if you're in an organization that tells you that you can't make comment, or a team that says you can't make comments, then the best thing you can do is just write a really comprehensive commit message.
The penn
Until your tech lead tells you that you have to change it.
Just curious, like when you said organization stops you putting comments, like what's the reason behind it? Like why would they stop you?
Sorry, so I should remember to repeat the question. So the question is, why would an organization tell you not to write comments? And usually I find it's because, for exactly what I said, some people have this belief that like code should just be self-documenting. There's no need for comments. But I've just never found that to be 100% true. I try to write my code in a way that is as self-documenting as possible. But there are just times where there's just some weird quirk that's hard to explain in like a method name or a variable name, and it just needs a comment.
Something complicated. It's gonna happen.
It happens, but I've been in places where they live by this idea that like, no, code, it speaks for itself. You don't need to, yeah. Up the back, yeah.
Yeah, you touched on this earlier, but I guess in my organization, we would lean much more towards putting this context into the pull request description. And yeah, that's sort of where you go as your source of truth. And hopefully pull request is small enough that they only contain one change. What are your thoughts or take on that?
So the question was, if you're in an organization, you could be in an organization where you preference putting the details in pull requests and you keep the pull requests small. What's my view on that? And it's, as I said, I still, those details still end up in the PR for me. I would put them in both. But as I said, the reason why I prefer commits is because it's so easy to get to. And you can just be in your editor. And even if the last commit for that line was, like I said, Rubicop change, well, like I know in my VS Code, it'll just show me every previous commit on that line. And it's so easy to quickly jump back. Whereas it's just that extra bit of effort to go to the PR.
Actually, for that, I work with DC, and I've got into the habit of when I have a PR that has multiple commits that will ultimately get squashed by GitHub, I usually just copy the PR description that I put a lot of work into the commit message. So the whole context is there when it's squashed.
Lovely.
You get like both worlds there.
I think though, this does though go back to what I was saying about the fact that I don't think there is just like one set of rules you can abide by, and you need to have these discussions in your organization and your team. And like you may deviate from the ways I do it, that's fine. All that really matters is that you're actually putting that content somewhere. So if you choose to use PRs over commit messages, as long as someone's putting the detail in the PR, that is a hell of a lot better than it just being a one-liner with no information. So.
On that, have you got any advice or seen any kind of stories where things have changed? Because I've usually seen organizations where this is the way they do it, and even though some people may be against it, they won't change it. But have you seen somewhere where an organization's moved to maybe adopt some of the ideas you've got?
So were they, sorry, is the question, have I seen an organization that previously only did single line commits but moved to this model, or they moved from a PR model to a commit model? Or?
Well, I suppose any of those, like, and how would you, what is there anything that you would imagine help transition to a better commit PR, whatever model?
I feel somewhat unqualified for this question, but ultimately, if you're asking like what would help get to a better commit or PR model, I mean, ultimately, it's just about having conversations, you know, like, and then just, it's actually not difficult to make the change. What can be difficult is just agreeing on what you consider important. And that's why I'm like, well, really what you've got to solve there is people. Yes.
I just wanted to make another point about, so you touched on different methods of using commit and different flags and different, if anybody's used the Git GUI, which once I saw that for the first time, it totally changed the way I used it. So I thought about it in the sense of strategic commits. I want these things belong together. Stage those, commit that with a good message. Next set of changes that make sense to go together. And then of course you can amend and rewrite to be able to refine those till you get to the point where you've got this nice set to push. I find that the Git GUI is an excellent workflow, whereas the command line is average in that respect.
The comment for anyone who missed it on Zoom is that the Git GUI can provide a fantastic way to solve these problems without needing to know all the appropriate commands. The interface makes it really easy to stage in chunks. I must confess the GUI's never gelled with me as well as the CLI, but I think that's just one of those many developer preferences things. And if the GUI makes it easy, then I'm 100% behind that too. Yeah.
I don't know, I'll probably like a comment, with this GUI stuff and fetching. I find a big criticism of fetching. I love fetching by myself. When you test drive things, you stage one chunk and you run a test. And if you have like unstage stuff in your code, your test passes, but it doesn't mean that the commit message passes. So you need to ensure that unstage stuff, you kind of stash it somewhere. And I'm just wondering, is there any easy way to stash kind of unstage stuff when you run kind of your test before you sign your commitment? Yeah.
So I assume you're talking about having atomic commits where like every commit must pass the test suite. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, you said like, on stage, like some
Yeah.
really some with Fred, and together they all pass.
It's actually a great question. So there was a comment that patch adding can be problematic if you work in atomic commits where every commit must have a passed in test suite. Then it's possible that after you stage your changes, the test suite will pass, but that's because the unstaged changes existed. And it was the question sort of like, can you get rid of those unstaged changes? I must confess I haven't tried it. What actually happens if you just stash?
Like you start generally commit stuff, you have to sign it, and then you have to stash all the rest stuff, and then you have to amend it. I'm just wondering, like, is there a way to quickly?
Because I thought when you
on stage.
I think that the keep index slide is getting on.
Yeah.
That's
a keep index.
Yeah.
Right, so apparently there's some way to do this using git stash with a keep index flag. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I haven't worked in enough places that use atomic commits, and it actually sounds like a great idea. But yeah,
Sorry, you haven't worked in places that use atomic commits. What are the non-atomic commits then? Are you just committing things and then massaging it later on, or?
well, the idea is that like the whole piece of work, so a whole PR would have to pass the test suite, but not an individual commit. It's not my preferred way to go, but I've previously been asked to do that where any, what would you call it? Any logical group of work might produce a larger, difficult to read PR. Because you know how like, in particular, it's pretty difficult to set the order in which you can read the changes in a PR. And so if someone wants to be able to see each bit in like, as it should be read, they tell me to break it up into commits. You could, of course, just squash that later. But I find that the kind of places that ask for that tend to not really care whether or not any particular commit passes the test suite. Personally, I prefer it. Particularly if you ever needed to do like a git bisect, it's going to be pretty painful if some of the commits just don't pass because they happen to be in one of the middle of a PR or something. Yeah. Final questions? Nope. Well, we might, nothing from the audience.
No.
Then we might wrap this one up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.